Gracias por estar ahí. Ya vamos terminando el último día de estos 5 días.
We're going to resume with the last session of the last day of these 5 days. There's people that have been connected all the time, chatting and participating. Remember that everything is recorded in YouTube, in Spanish and in English. Then we're going to edit videos in a higher quality, and we are going to upload them. This is the last panel of the day. Then we have 2 keynote speeches. And what we wanted to do with this panel was to include other topics. We have seen infrastructure, ethics, AI, security, privacy, but we wanted to talk a little bit about all this and if this is accessible all the time. So are we building an accessible internet? That is the title. And we have invited people that are going to address this topic. And we are going to talk about some specific projects. And the moderator of this panel is Mr. Raúl Echeberría. I want to congratulate him. He has recently been appointed as CEO of ALIGN, the Latin American Association of Internet. That is an important association promoting the use of a free open internet. So congratulations on your new position. And Raúl has always supported us. I don't know if you remember once in Egypt when we were talking about the school. The school was born in Argentina, was created in Argentina. We didn't know where to do the next one. And he told me it would be a good idea to do it once in Argentina and one time in another country. And we started with the idea of doing it every year in a different country in the region. I always remember that. He's a great friend, a person with a lot of experience, well known in the region. Now we follow him. We have to follow him in social networks, social media. I hope that you are well, and now I'm going to give you the floor so that you can moderate the panel. Good afternoon. Thanks, Olga, for the introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here with you once again in this Internet Governance School, a very successful event throughout all these years. And congratulations on adapting to this special situation that we have this year. Congratulations also on the scenario that you have there, that I really like it. I'm not in Uruguay now, I'm in Barcelona. It's almost night here. And thanks to this great tool that is the internet, we can see that we have a potential to change things. We are in this panel, we have different speakers, well-known speakers in their industries. We are going to start giving the floor to Mark. I don't know how to pronounce your surname. Datysgeld. So we are going to call you Mark. Mark works in universal acceptance. And I think that it's interesting to start with Mark's presentation because accessibility is always a gap. We are always worried about gaps of connecting people in remote locations, which is important, locations in which infrastructure is not so good, or vulnerable areas in which there is no economic possibility for people living there to connect. So sometimes we forget about the other gaps, which do not depend on the environment, but on other factors. Then we're going to give the floor to Pablo, who is going to give us an overview of the complexity of this gap. We're going to start with Mark. He works for ICANN. Sometimes we don't see how this influence infrastructure, and in this case through domain names systems. So what is ICANN doing? What are the challenges from the infrastructure perspective, the DNS, and how to give access to all people? Nowadays, the main gap is language. Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure to be, thank you, Raúl. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm going to try to speak in the best possible Spanish, but I'm sorry for any mistake that I may make. Universal acceptance is an important topic because it deals with including languages in DNS or domain names. It's not something that we think that is so simple, but the Latin American perspective, since we have the same alphabet in the region, we may think that all over the world there are different ways of communication. I have a presentation. I don't know if it's possible to share it. Is it possible to share my PowerPoint? I guess that somebody's going to be sharing your presentation. So the main concept is that there is a domain name that is not in the characters that we are used to, A to Z or 0 to 9. There are different things, different elements, such as, for example, Chinese characters, which are totally different. So we need to study a little bit more. Next slide, please. So we can see that this is different from our perception. There's a huge difference between script and language. The script is a set of basic symbols and elements such as A, I, but actually it looks totally different. And the language is how we use those scripts to communicate. In the next slide, to give you a little bit of the perception, we can see that linguistic diversity all over the world is stronger than we may feel in America. The Asian and European region, we can see in the map that it's totally diverse. These are things that cannot be described in the same way. So how can we address this topic? Maybe we can say this is not our problem. We are not going to get involved in this. Next slide, please. But In 2011, URLs were developed without ASCII characters with Punycode technology. It seems simple, but it's a little bit more complex. We have an example with Chinese characters. We can see that these are very specific characters, but
para los sistemas de nombres de dominios,
when we talk about domain names, we have the result may be XN in the translation of these characters. We can do the translation in the Punycode site. It's very interesting. The dimension of this, it's difficult to think about it. Here we can see that in the case of Indian characters, in India there are 22 official languages, 13 official alphabets, and all are used at the same time in different parts of the country. So how can we operate something like this in domain names? The Indian strategy involves the development of some IDNs in the different scripts. So all the elements in the IDN column are the same word. That is .bat, which means the Indian Republic, but in different languages. So we need to think that for people in these regions, this is the way they have to express themselves. But if they have to communicate in ASCII, they may not understand what ASCII is, or they may not be used to use it. So next slide, please. It's not only a matter of language itself, but linguistic matter, but we do have new extensions that represent better the identity of the person having the domain name. So we may have, for example, .Amsterdam. If we have a franchise in Amsterdam, why cannot we use it as .Barcelona or .Kyoto? There are different alternatives to express in the DNS, and it is not so important from the linguistic point of view, but it's interesting. In the next slide, the solution in ICANN is universal acceptance. I'm not going to talk about this a lot, but there are mainly 5 steps to accept, validate, process, store, and display. If we think about doing all this or taking all the steps, it's not going to be possible to do the whole processing of Chinese characters or Indian characters. In the next slide, we can see, or I'm trying to show you this. To accept and to validate, but to store or to process is difficult. So it's not to know only a single component, but how the structure or the software is going to deal with universal acceptance. Next slide, the last one, please. We did a global survey about compliance of universal acceptance of the most visited websites in the world in 2019 and 2020, and comparing with 2017. I'm not going to go in depth on this, but you can see it in the site. But there's a growth in accepting new domains. But the acceptance in different scripts is something that we still need to work on. Thank you. I don't want to take time from other participants. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Having explained this in a few slides, it looks simple. But this has been a substantial change of DNS, or the way we see DNS. When we go to countries that they have different alphabets, different from the West, and we see billboards and ads, we see how much these kind of things will impact upon. We'll go to Pablo Lecuona. He has a long track record in forms of internet governance and accessibility. He's famous for leading projects that are successful. A digital library for the blind in Argentina. And I am sure that it's sometimes very cumbersome to go to events and tired to discuss the same things. But we know that there are different methodologies or legitimate ways of getting certificates for those people with disabilities, and especially the public policy are not evidence-based, and the advance of applications sometimes, or the progress of populations that were developed do not contemplate this sector of society for the disabled. So what is the diagnosis? What is the perspective that you see for the future? Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to participate here. No, I don't get tired of repeating and saying this. It has to do with raising awareness, something that is a fundamental right to get accessibility. Sometimes accessibility, internet and physical spaces. Accessibility has to do with the design and raising awareness of diversity of consumers, users, and people that walk virtually or physically. And sometimes, barriers are produced because of lack of awareness or lack of knowledge, or because we don't think of that diversity. Precisely when Mark was discussing with language, yeah, those are things that emerge, and sometimes it's not that visible or understood because we tend to think of a single user, a single language. And luckily, one of the abilities or the capabilities that we have with the internet is to connect with the world. Our work started 22 years ago when it was new to us. We started with the internet for those people that are visually impaired, open up a lot of opportunities to solve things that historically did not have any simple solutions. So in the year 2009, we wanted to create a digital library for the visually impaired because access was limited. You had braille books or audio books, and the digital world provided new opportunities for this. First, when using some kind of a scanner or a screen scanner, we could have access to information that was not feasible before, to use a computer to read a newspaper, to look for websites, to look for information, search engines. And by doing that, we had access to information, especially for those of us that do not have, that are visually impaired. We couldn't do this before. Digitalization of text or printed media. We knew that we had information, but we couldn't read. With OCR, with a scanner, we could read it in hybrid mode in a computer, and the internet basically made possible this transition so we could read that material. And building this digital library that started with a small group of people working on the internet had to do with using the internet as leveraging resources and leveraging what technology brings to the table and interconnection. And with the digital library, we had a whole new set of experiences, contacts, clarification of doubts, uses in common for the visually impaired for other disabilities at the global level and at the local level. So basically, we were not disabled any longer by doing that. And we started seeing that for this accessibility or the scanning to be successful or to grow, that it could be legal and well balanced, we had to create a legal framework that is different, extended to some copyright laws that basically we couldn't do it into turn it into audiobooks without paying exclusivity rights. And then a worldwide negotiation at the UN to get a treaty signing the legal rules of the game that internet as a new medium could allow the publishing houses to exchange them, to turn them into audiobooks, and not to produce the same book for Argentina, for Mexico, and Colombia. So the internet could optimize in this way resources. On the one hand, it created a whole network of people that had one common objective to improve a better methodology for resolving this disability. And at the same time, we had to change legal frameworks to consider these possibilities and to explore the possibility of making reading accessible to the blind. And there's a lot of work to be done because the great challenge is that internet is not only a challenge for the blinds, but it opens a whole set of new opportunities to having access to resources, regardless of their geographic location or condition. People with disabilities, we kind of go unnoticed. We are not considered as users when we consider a website or when we design a mobile application. What may happen, and unfortunately happens, is that when we build the internet, if we do not have accessibility consider and the accessibility of users that have access to a product on the internet, we end up creating a barrier that is sometimes that is simple. If I go and log in a website and had to click, or before, basically, I had to go to an agency. Right now, given the context of the pandemic, I can do it out of home. And that paperwork can be done in 3 clicks. But as they are not designed labeled for the visually impaired, with the reader, it says button, 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 and one is one win $1 million, the other one is lose my whole fortune, and the other one is buy a hot dog. Regardless, the issue is that when designing a platform, if you do not consider people with disabilities, we run into barriers to have access to information of public domain, do a paperwork, and to be independent. What happened during the pandemic, home banking websites, they have security measures and you cannot operate because with the screen reader, basically you cannot do it, and then you depend on other people. You go to ATM that is not that accessible for people with disabilities. So I bring this not as a story, but to consider that there are many initiatives that they use the internet to provide access to communities, diversity, people with disabilities, tackling the challenges of inclusion, educational aspects, having the necessary books to study, resources, and that is great. That is fantastic. But at the same time, accessibility implies or needs to be present across the internet functions, because when you work, regardless of what you're doing, developing an application, developing a website, or developing infrastructure on the internet, you always need to think of diversity and social inclusion. And this is what we're targeting towards. We want to raise awareness that accessibility is something that is a must, is necessary, and if we do not comply with that, we have vulnerabilities like the vulnerability or the weakness to having access to operations, educational material, paperwork, etc. And it's a dimension that we need to include everybody that is involved in the internet. Not only that we have, as people with disabilities, have to look for this, but we need to make this change and to be a cross-functional issue, because diversity is omnipresent all the time. And we need to create the necessary knowledge and raise awareness. As people with disabilities who are visually impaired are sometimes go unnoticed, and as we have people think that we don't even use computers because we're blind and we cannot see the screen. But yeah, we can do many things over the internet as long as that environment is accessible. The definition of disability on the Convention of People with Disabilities aim at disability being some kind of impairment that is physical, but interacting with the environment, even though it may be inaccessible, but if it's user friendly and it doesn't have barriers, basically you can overcome these barriers. The important thing is that we are all aware of this concept of accessibility as a dimension. It has to do with the elderly, also with people that are not adept to computers, IT, information, the time to do things. For example, we're doing a campaign led by ADC, that is the Civil Rights Association. Could you conclude? Yes, I would like to conclude by saying, apart from the studies, apart from the use of the internet, to resolve accessibility issues, what we need to put back in the agenda on the part of the state and the stakeholders in the internet and those that create the infrastructure, content, and people with disabilities that are also involved in that need to have accessibility, to include this access of accessibility. And if we consider when we create or develop the application, we could make internet available and interactive with people, for people with disabilities, especially because we have disabilities in all our daily lives. So yeah, we are producing digital content and a library, but we want to make disability to be a present dimension. Thank you very much, Pablo. It's fantastic to hear all these projects. The way you define standards and the way you describe disabilities, not only from the physical point of view, but in connection with many other things. If not, the impairment would be trivial. And I liked what you said about impairing somebody's rights or violating somebody's rights, which is very visible, but not to create the necessary conditions to basically exercise those rights is another impairment, like having access to information of public domain. If the conditions are not given for you to have access, you end up discriminating and having inequalities and rights where societies should not have that, at least in the 21st century. Thank you very much. And the last panel for today is Miguel Ignacio Estrada, the director of LACTLD in Latin America and the Caribbean. Even though we were describing this with Mark, I'm sure that you could provide us with a supplementary view, especially approaching the methodology for a region. What LACTLD operators could do to improve accessibility in our region. Thank you very much, Raúl. Thank you very much, Olga, for your invitation. Can I share my presentation?
Simplemente para hacerles una introducción, LACTLD, como les decía Raúl, es la asociación
As I was telling Raúl, in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have 99 members. In the second slide, can you go to the second slide? Okay, this is the list. We have associates from other regions, other countries. And then we have the organizers. Among others, we have the organizer of this conference. Let me tell you what the missions are. Of the Cctlds to guarantee the stability, resilience, and robustness of TLDs, to operate the TLD with technical competition, and to have clear transparency, fair, and just policies in the registration of domains. Now let's go to the next one. In our region, the administration of Cctlds is multi-sectorial per se. We have 40% operated by academy, society 14, government 24, and civil society 17. So this makes up the whole way, or a holistic way in where we approach the management of the internet. Here we have the proposals of many stakeholders that are members of our association to see how we approach our community. In terms of domains and accessibility, it is clear that we want this to be used across the world. Domain or internet domains, we see the way Cctlds or NECs or the channels for sale, if they're usable or not, their cost, if they're affordable or not, and host, delegate the names. And on the other hand, you have accessibility, is what Mark said about universal acceptance. In our case, as Mark said, we have limited characters. In the region, we share some of the characters apart from the ASCII characters. So it's a great challenge for us, even though it's not easy. It's closer rather than the challenges that we have with India and other regions in Asia. Connectivity, even though I'm not gonna, even though CCLDs have connectivity efforts, it's not the core of their responsibilities, and cybersecurity and security is something that we advocate. Next one. And the next one. These are some of the projects. And I see Argentina in the pandemic. There we've seen an increase in domain registration. They were not being used. So they started asking questions to see what was going on. If that lack of usage was of digital use, and provided training thereon, which was very, very important. I said, okay, they registered, but they cannot be online. So what are we going to do in order to host their business ventures? They could have it online and easy to show them, alternative or different options. So they conducted free ongoing training for those people that could not continue, posting their websites. And then we had, together with the C host and with Cabase, with the Internet Chamber, we hosted a program that is called Assistance to Digital SMEs. We provided training with hosted services, website design, up to 5 pages online, email, SSL security, payment collection, integral, Mercado Libre, WhatsApp, for 6 months for free. So people that were not included in the system, we gave them at the same time the facilitation of having this training, so they could be present in the online world. And I see Brazil has made ongoing efforts with safe internet websites. We're working on fake news, two-step authentication that has to do with everything that has to do with phishing and banking or data theft, malicious malware or malicious code, mobile device protection. It has to do with accessibility to join, to be on board, and to protect the users. We have many stakeholders in the internet that are using this, and sometimes they fall victims of this malicious code or many bad things that could be anticipated. So we're working along these lines in NIC Brazil. NIC Mexico provided support by way of 2 programs on e-commerce, providing training. You have a couple of minutes. I have only 2 slides left. As I said, we were supporting the digital presence, platforms like Le Atiendo por Internet, Amacho con Causa, to provide career development or growth. Next one. Now, NIC Ecuador is a very interesting case because they had some pilot tests to create or design a simple website, and they went a step beyond that, and they, through a form that clients filled out, they designed this client's website, and they have incredible growth because they were able to overcome a barrier, because people did not dare or venture to in designing their own websites. So they did for the clients, providing certain parameters of safety, security, and design, and they were very successful. Next one is SVNet. They have the tech angle. initiative that is creating digital capabilities for developing young people that are in the most vulnerable sectors of society. And Costa Rica, and I see Costa Rica, next slide please. They address the pandemic, cutting costs in registrations of domain in the 70%, to give SMEs the chance or enough opportunities to be online. Finally, there's no inclusion whatsoever or accessibility if the internet is stable, safe, and resilient. And then Brazil has no NICAS to allow all the Cctlds in the region to have access to this service, providing stability, security, and resilience. Our president was going to give this presentation. However, he had the FRIDA awards, so he couldn't make it. I'm sorry that I had to take over. Thank you. Thank you, Nacho. It's very interesting how through many of these presentations we have analyzed different perspectives on accessibility, language aspects, infrastructure, content tiers, people with disabilities, some of the issues that we're trying to overcome, taking advantage of the penetration that we have in local communities, everything that has to do with the complexity that Pablo was telling you about. Knowing full well how they are visually impaired, but also this may extend to other possibilities for people with disabilities by not considering certain parameters when designing a website or applications. We have time for questions, one or two questions, right? I have several comments.
From the audience, from the students. And I also wanted to do some comments. Since I'm the moderator, I'm going to remind you that we still have 8 minutes. By being in a virtual conference, we have some different problems, and we need some time to change the videos and all that. Noelia Rigo is telling us that it's a great pleasure to have this panel. I am hypoacusic and I have some problems in my life, but I have solved them. And knowing that internet is including us is really good news. Mercedes Velázquez is saying that what Pablo is mentioning is very interesting. They asked Mark to share the website with the information and statistics, if you can remind us that. Mark? Mark's not there. He went to another room. Okay, I'm going to give you the site later on. Congratulations, Pablo. Pablo is very humble. I want to mention all the things that he does. Through the Internet Society Argentinian chapter, we try to help the library. And I want to mention the training that they do for visually impaired people, not only in Argentina, but also in Latin America. Pablo, calibrate me if I'm wrong. For a person with visual impairment, it's not that they are going to sit in the computer and start using it. They need some training. It's not that difficult, but they need to be trained. Some things need to be learned. And how this changed many people's lives. I don't remember, last year it was the 20th anniversary of the library, and there was a woman telling us about her husband that had a very depressing life until once in the radio she listened about Pablo, contact him, and that man started using the computer. He was an accountant, and he started using the computer and could do his job. So that changed his life. So she was grateful to Pablo and the team. That is why this lack of knowledge as regards technology or what technology can give to people with disabilities. The problem also is that people with disabilities may think that there's nothing to be done and that's it. And nowadays, through technology, if we have accessible environments and the use of certain tools, there are huge opportunities, and that is the challenge that we face today. To reach more than 90% of people with disabilities that are not connected nowadays. And we are not going to be able to do it alone. We will do it when access is a general concept in internet, when things are easy to use and accessible. So a person with a disability can understand that by using a cell phone. Cell phones are key. When there were display readers in the computer, you had to buy a specific software that was expensive for the computer, and then you could have access. So it was very expensive. Nowadays, there are free tools, and cellulars with iOS and Android have accessibility and options for those with hearing impairments. And those are options that you have in every cell phone, and that makes it more accessible. And a person with a disability can start using a device that will allow him to access these tools and everything that we can do with this kind of tools. So I want to invite you all to be part of this challenge. The problem that we have with disabilities in Latin America and the world is lack of knowledge. And we can all change that by making it more accessible. Thank you, Pablo. I adapt my cell phone and my headphones that way. I also wanted to remind you, they are asking to have Pablo's contact in Nicaragua. They are trying to implement a technology library, and they want to include people with disabilities. You can find us in our webpage, and we need to work together. And before talking with Nacho, I want to remind you that Pablo is not only working in Latin America and Argentina, but he also gave access to content to people with disabilities globally through the Marrakesh Treaty, which is a treaty that changes the legal framework internationally so that there are exceptions for copyright to make accessible books. And this has to do with the internet potential, that books can be exchanged between countries. An accessible book that is in a digital format in a country can reach another country quickly, and we can share resources, and that is internet. Today, we are part of an accessible books platform of the WIPO, and There are many books available there, and when countries ratify this treaty, books can be exchanged and reach all the countries. That is the potential that internet is giving us. We are happy to help you and to promote what you are doing in this from the school, and it's always a great pleasure to have you with us. And now I would like to talk to Nacho, because what he was showing was very important. As domain name administrators, you were able to do some actions that go beyond what you're doing to promote e-commerce, to decrease the price of domains when people need to communicate more. And that is the importance of what we call the country code. For Argentina is .ar, for Brazil is BR, UI for Uruguay, and more than 300 all over the world. And these registries are not something more. I think that there's some sensitivity as regards this, and the work of that Nacho was talking about reflects on that.
No encontraba el mouse. Estoy con dos pantallas, pero el mouse.
I couldn't find my mouse. Thank you, Olga. The Cctld's have that you were mentioning, and our association has something interesting, that is this sense of non-competition among us. Any idea that may arise in a country is offered to all the rest of the countries, and we share it. And it's a great pleasure to be working here because we cooperate with each other. There are no conflicts, and that shows, and it shows in the work that we do in the communities. Congratulations on the Frida Award, which is really important as well for information access safely and quickly and in a resilient way. I don't know, Raúl, if you want to comment on something. Since today is Friday, we are finishing with this 5-day event, successful conference. And it's a great pleasure to participate in this governance school with distinguished colleagues and friends. It's always a pleasure and an honor. And I expect to have the next opportunity to share with you all. I hope that all participants could take advantage of this kind of event. And I want to thank the organizers. Congratulations once again to Raúl and Nacho for their new positions. Congratulations, Pablo, for your constant achievement in allowing people to change their lives. And greetings from Oscar and Adrián. We have like a TV studio. I feel that I am on TV. It's been a great effort, but I hope that it was attractive for all of you. Thank you for being here with us today. I hope that you are well. Take care. I don't know, Raúl, if you're going to stay in Barcelona. I hope that you come to the region. We need you here. And I hope that you take care of yourselves, and we'll see each other virtually or face-to-face somewhere. Thank you. Thank you all, and goodbye. It's in the library for blind people. It's incredible the work that they have done. I have seen Pablo in the city of Buenos Aires alone, I wanted to help him.
Me lo admiro profundamente. Yo con 2 ojos, 2 piernas y 2 brazos a veces.
And he said that he could do it himself.
Gente, volvemos en pocos minutos con el viceministro Germán Rueda, viceministro TIC de Colombia. No se vayan. Chao.
Now we're going to continue with the Vice Minister of Colombia.